So, Pressure Machine by The Killers is 11 songs, 51 minutes long. And The Killers, god damn it, released Imploding the Mirage
Like a year ago,
almost
exactly.
like a year ago to the day. It was in July or August, somewhere around this time.
It was definitely August.
Yeah. And they've had a number of different releases. We kind of talked about this last year. I don't want to make this feel like too much deja vu. But yeah, really popular in the early 2000s, like alternative scene. In the mid 2010s, kind of like moving around, fumbling a little bit. And I don't fully remember where we came out from their last
Floating the
album.
Mirage, I
Yeah.
didn't mind it. I thought it was a step in the right direction ish. There's still some issues with it, but I thought they had some decent tracks. Like the opening, My Own Soul's Warning, I think is a pretty good like pop alt rock song, and it's kind of like goes back to their tried and true sound and whatnot. Because Wonderful Wonderful, what came out in 2017, I think was it's a pure miss of an album, but Platinum Mirage I thought was a decent comeback. You know, in the Coldplay scale of selling out, they did well instead of the Coldplay. But I'm pretty sure
That also may need to be another arbitrary scale. And I
that
also do remember
100% needs to be a fucking arbitrary scale.
I'll need to add
Coldplay
that to
selling
the
out levels.
I'll need
Please
to
God, we need to do that.
I need to add that to the arbitrary scales bank. And I'll also say I do remember
We
loving
need,
Fire and Bone as well.
yeah, we need to do that scale when we review Coldplay's album later this year. So if it comes out this year, because God damn it. Anyways, moving on to Pressure Machine. Now this album is all about their childhood, where they grew up. I think it's a small town outside of Las Vegas, Nevada. I'm pretty sure is where they're all from, and it's a slowed down record. It's stripped back. There's still like some solid alt rock in it, but it's very different to anything that they've really done before,
I mean, like
for
it's
for
their
better and for worse.
yeah, it's kind of their quarantine album, if you will, as it's kind of being referred to and called by a number of other artists doing this. They did this because they couldn't tour, and that kind of explains like the quick turnaround. But I think I don't know if they've referred to this as such, but I could say this is a concept album because they definitely are
It's
like
100%. It 100% is a concept album. I mean,
yeah.
at least when I listen through it, it sounds like it, because every single track just about has a little like interlude of somebody they interviewed from the city or from the town, and talking about like a small town, blah blah blah, talk about this or that, and then it goes into the track itself, and each song does that, and it kind of plays throughout a whole story of getting different pictures and images throughout your head of what setting it wants to be in, what it wants you to imagine it to be, and all of that, and gets you what feeling it wants to set throughout it.
Yeah, and there are times that the Killers have been sort of like dancey or poppy or even
Yeah,
like
yeah,
have synth
a
or
lot.
electronics in that. Replace all of that and keep like whatever's left of the Killers like rock alternative kind of thing, and then slow that down a little bit more and add a little bit of like folk and Americana
Like
flair here and
Western,
there.
yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes I can't handle it. Like I think in it's either Quiet Town or Terrible Thing. There's like a harmonica thing, and even though I
Yeah,
like
there's
melodica, it's
one.
a little bit
No,
like much.
exactly. There's one track, I believe it's Terrible Things, that like I can't remember if it's Quiet Town or Terrible Thing, but one of them does that, and it actually ruined the song for me, because I thought the song was actually pretty decent, and then it just kept, yeah, it kept going. Oh, it's Quiet Town.
Yeah.
It's just went a little too long for it. Um, but other than that, I think that was like the one miss of the album. But I thought the rest of it was actually pretty good from them, because somebody who's been established for, you know, nearly 2 decades, and has been one of the biggest rock bands out in the world, they need to do something different and try some other things, like we've always said. I mean, they're never going to make another Hot Fuss, which is one of my favorite alt rock albums ever made, or Sam's Town or Battleborn, whatever. They're never going to make those albums again, but you don't want them to just try and just have a formula for success and whatever, just going to get put out onto the radio and make bops. It's cool to have them strip back and to make a concept album about where they came from, and kind of get an idea of like Brandon Flowers is a big time Mormon, for those of you who don't know, so you can kind of get a little bit of that in this album, and kind of get his like things in there, which he doesn't really talk about too often within the band itself. He does it in his own personal life and like interviews with himself, but usually not within the Killers as like the group. Right now as a trio, because I think the guitarist is still on the one of their main guys is still on leave from the band. But going into more of the musicality, you do pick up that Western theme kind of throughout the album. It's pretty calm and chill. Like West Hills and Quiet Town are like it starts off the album a little bit higher than what it's going to be throughout the rest of it. If that makes any sense, it kind of starts up here and then it kind of goes down, but then it
Upbeat, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And but you have little songs that will pick you up here, there, and then songs that will slow you down. You have Runaway Horses with Phoebe Bridgers, she's been doing a bunch of stuff throughout the past couple of years, like popping on a bunch of different indie tracks, a bunch of different random stuff too with trap artists and now with Killers and things where she's doing a lot of stuff. But it's a really nice. I actually really like the harmony with her, Brandon Flowers, and Phoebe Bridgers there on Runaway Horses. Um, Track after that is when it kind of picks back up with In the Car Outside, and that's to me where like I actually like that sound. It can get a little annoying here and there, but I thought it's like a decent try for them to have like their tried and true sound, but then try a different spin on it. So for someone who's been around, for a group that's been around that long, I think it's again another step in the right direction from having kind of missed albums in the mid 2010s to last year's album that I thought was decent, and now this. Yeah, I think they're doing decent things now, and their
Yeah.
stage presence is still incredible. If you ever watch them live, or if you get a chance to watch them live, do it because they are very good live. Like them Glastonbury, I think 2 or 3 years ago was incredible.
Yeah, I've heard that they are. I've heard from a lot of people who've said they're very good live and just like put on a good show. And I think I like the way you sort of. I agree with 2 points what you said that like there's some good songs like before Runaway Horses, but Runaway Horses with Phoebe Bridgers really marks a turning point in the album a little bit to where it sort of reverses, not necessarily that it's like a bottom heavy album, but like you have more of like the faster ish songs or like other, I feel like songs that are like more with depth, there's more packed into them from like 7 onwards essentially. I'm sorry, 6 onwards. So including
Yes.
Runaway Horses. And In the Car Outside, the second thing I would agree with you on is that it really gets to, yeah, the Killers trying to do a modern spin on what they're known for and what they're good at, and executing that fairly well.
Yes.
I think the title track "Pressure Machine" near the end is also like pretty nice too. There's some random lyric that I just like laughed at so much I forget about. That was like going on the podcast I couldn't remember, but like, I think it did a good job of taking middle, just sort of like working class, like middle America kind of vibes and
Mm-hmm.
that feel of it, and not making it sound sort of like played out or hacky or anything like that. It really
Exactly.
sounds genuine.
Exactly. It feels very genuine because you could easily construe this, like you could easily make this be very like My Lana Del Rey comparison of not genuine at all, just out of touch, this or that. But it gives you a really good representation of, hey, we really came from a small area and now we're like one of the biggest bands in the world, and we want to pay tribute to, we live here, that's what we do, we come from this area, and we want to show off the people that we grew up with and the kind of things that we knew as kids and teenagers growing up. And you can hear that throughout the sound and through, I think it's a very good make for a concept album, and especially on with a big pop band, it's nice to hear them have a sound that they haven't really explored too much too.
And on that like comparison to like artists like Lana Del Rey who claim to like do albums that like go to their roots. Like this is a really like good example of like a really major artist like passing the mic to people in like their community and talking about their own stories and different things. But it has a very like slice of life, almost like King of the Hill thing, where like no story is necessarily like amazing or overly fictionalized or whatever. It's just a slice of life. This is the way people live, and like that is I think in a lot of ways it's meant to kind of, what makes this like feel like a really good concept album is it's meant to feel like a constraint in certain ways, but only if you see it in that way. If you see it as like it is something that
Yeah.
keeps you there, especially the anecdotes about like it's a great town, it's a great place to raise kids and probably will never leave that are in certain songs. You could see that as a prison, which like a lot of people do, and then they like move out and do those sorts of different things. And then other people like they sort of see that and go like, no, yeah, this is good. Like this is sort of like a nice little slice of utopia, and you like leave it for vacations or whatever, but it's like a nice thing. and like it's sort of that duality that it can have at both times that provides a lot of depth and insight that does not exist in a lot of Lana Del Rey projects in comparison to doing this sort of like twist towards Americana and callback to these things, and in a folk kind of manner that feels like genuine and to its roots, because that's the kind of point we're trying to get at.
Yeah, and like Coldplay scale, this is the inverse of the Coldplay of trying to go back to pay homage to people who helped you throughout your life and everything, instead of selling out to fucking major pop labels just to make a pretty penny.
Right.
So good on you, Killers.
Off from the reverse Coldplay scale, which maybe could also be an arbitrary scale. I don't know. We're just kind of like milk these here. To the Mr. Rogers to WAP index.
Ooh. Shit, what is this? You know what this is? This is House of Cards. This is Tom York going through the computer animated, just being wubby, like, what in the fuck is going on? And it still holds up to this day, 15 years later, 14 years later, which is crazy to think. Jesus Christ. I remember when that music video was released.
Arbitrary scales would have to make sense. I still think like the more sexual the video, the better, and I'm not sure how, but I'm also not going to king shame. I'm gonna say that for me, this is mid 2010s Gucci Mane video.
Alright, I can get on board with that.
Yeah, any one of those, just literally any one of those would work.